I, 28M, had always believed my life was an open book. My father was a man of immense wealth and influence, and I was his only son, the sole heir to everything he had built. Our family wasn't warm, not in the way you see in movies, but it was stable. It was built on tradition, expectation, and a quiet, unspoken understanding that I would one day take his place. That was my path. It was as certain as the sun rising in the east. Until a man I had never seen before walked into our home and set my entire world on fire. It happened during my parents' 35th wedding anniversary dinner. It was a formal affair, held in the grand dining room of our estate. A dozen of my father's closest business partners and their spouses were there. The air was filled with the polite murmur of conversation and the clinking of crystal glasses. My mother was beaming, looking elegant in a silver dress. My father, Robert, was at the head of the table, holding court as he always did. He was a man who commanded respect, with a presence that filled any room he entered. I was making a toast to my parents when the dining room doors opened. It was not the catering staff. A man stood there, framed in the doorway. He was not dressed for the occasion, wearing a worn jacket and simple trousers. He looked to be in his early 30s, with a hard set to his jaw and eyes that scanned the room with an unnerving intensity. They landed on my father. A tense silence fell over the table. My father's smile faltered. He stared at the man, his knuckles turning white where he gripped his wine glass. The man took a step forward. His voice was steady, but it cut through the silence like a knife. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, though he did not sound sorry at all. "I'm looking for Robert." My father's face was a mask of cold fury. "You have the wrong house," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Leave now." The man let out a short, bitter laugh. "No, I don't think so," he said, taking another step closer. He looked from my father to me, then back again. A strange, knowing look crossed his face. "I'm the real heir." The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. My mind reeled. A dozen thoughts crashed into me at once. Was this a joke? A scam? A madman who had wandered onto the property? I looked at my mother. Her face was a mixture of confusion and outrage. She started to rise from her chair, ready to call for security. But then I looked at my father, and that is when my world truly began to crack. My father, the man of iron will and unshakable composure, had gone ghostly white. The color had drained completely from his face, leaving behind a waxy, pale sheen. His mouth was slightly agape, and a look of pure, unadulterated shock was frozen in his eyes. It was a look I had never seen on him before. It was fear. In that single silent moment, I knew. The man in the doorway was not a random stranger. He was telling the truth, or at least a truth my father recognized. "Robert, who is this man?" my mother demanded, her voice trembling slightly. My father didn't answer her. He couldn't seem to tear his eyes away from the intruder. "Get out," he finally managed to say, his voice a hoarse whisper. The man, this stranger who called himself the heir, just shook his head slowly. "We need to talk," he said. "You know we do." The atmosphere at the table was thick with unspoken questions. Our guests were frozen, their eyes darting between my father and the stranger. The perfect evening, the celebration of a long and happy marriage, had shattered into a million pieces. My toast was forgotten. The laughter was gone. All that remained was the chilling pronouncement from a man who looked just enough like my father to make the lie feel terrifyingly real. I felt a cold dread seep into my bones. My life, the one I had known for 28 years, was about to change forever. My father finally broke the spell. He pushed his chair back with a loud scrape and stood up, his body rigid. "This is a private matter," he announced to the room, his voice strained but regaining some of its usual authority. "I apologize for the disruption. Please, continue your dinner." He turned to the man. "You and I will speak outside." The man gave a slight nod. He didn't look triumphant, just tired and resolved. He backed out of the dining room, and my father followed him, closing the heavy oak doors behind them. The silence they left behind was even worse than before. Everyone at the table stared at the closed doors, then at my mother, then at me. My mother sat back down, her hands trembling in her lap. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a question she couldn't bring herself to ask. I had no answers for her. I had only the same terrible question echoing in my own mind. "Perhaps we should go." One of the guests, a man named Mr. Harrison, said gently. My mother nodded numbly. "Yes," she whispered. "I think that would be best." There was a flurry of quiet, awkward goodbyes. People who had arrived with smiles and laughter now left with somber faces, avoiding eye contact. They were escaping the drama, fleeing back to their own normal lives. I couldn't blame them. I wished I could flee too. Within minutes, the grand dining room was empty except for my mother and me, surrounded by the remnants of a party that had died a sudden, violent death. "What is happening?" my mother asked, her voice barely audible. "Who is that?" "I don't know," I said, and it was the honest truth. I felt like a stranger in my own home. We waited for what felt like an eternity. I could hear the faint murmur of voices from outside, but I couldn't make out the words. It was just the low, angry rumble of my father's voice and the calmer, steadier tones of the other man. After about 15 minutes, the front door opened and closed. I went to the window and saw the man walking down our long driveway, his shoulders slumped. He didn't look back. A moment later, my father returned to the dining room. His face was still pale, but the fear had been replaced by a familiar, stubborn anger. He looked at the half-eaten dinners, the abandoned wine glasses, and his jaw tightened. "Robert, you have to tell me what that was," my mother said, standing up to face him. "It was nothing," he said, his voice flat and dismissive. He started gathering plates as if clearing the table would clear the air. "It was a mistake. A grifter looking for a payday." "A grifter?" my mother repeated, her voice rising. "You looked like you had seen a ghost. I have never seen you look that way in my life. Do not lie to me. Robert." "I am not lying," he snapped. "The matter is handled. He is gone and he will not be back. Now, let's forget this whole unfortunate incident." "Forget it?" I spoke up, unable to stay silent any longer. "Dad, he said he was the real heir." "What does that mean?" My father turned his cold gaze on me. "It means he is delusional. It has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with this family. I want you to drop it. Do you understand me?" His tone was sharp, a clear command. It was the tone he used to close a business deal or end an argument he knew he was losing. It was a stone wall, and I was expected to walk away from it. But for the first time in my life, I couldn't. The image of his ghostly white face was burned into my mind. He was lying. And the lie was so profound, so terrifying, that he was willing to destroy his own anniversary and humiliate my mother just to keep it hidden. I knew then that this was not over. The man was gone for now, but the truth he brought with him was still here, a poison seeping into the foundations of our family. My father wanted to bury it. I knew I had to dig it up. I am 28 years old. My entire existence has been shaped by my father's legacy. From the time I was a boy, I was taught about the business, about responsibility, about the name I carried. I went to the right schools, got the right degrees, and joined the company at the bottom, just as he had, to learn every facet of the empire I was destined to inherit. I never questioned it. It was my duty, my identity. I was Robert's son, the heir. Now that single solid fact of my life had been fractured. I'm the real heir. The words echoed in my head. It felt like a fundamental law of my universe had been proven false. If I wasn't the heir, who was I? What was my life, my purpose, my entire future? The shock was quickly turning into a cold, gnawing anger, not just at the stranger, but at my father. His denial wasn't just a lie. It was a betrayal. He was asking me to accept a fiction, to pretend I hadn't seen his mask of terror, to go on being the dutiful son while he hid a secret that could redefine my very being. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene over and over. The man's confident stare, my mother's crumbling composure, my father's ashen face. He had handled it, he said. But what did that mean? Did he pay the man off? Threaten him? Whatever he did, it felt like a temporary fix, a patch on a dam that was about to burst. The next morning, the house was unnaturally quiet. The staff moved about with hushed footsteps, their eyes avoiding mine. The drama of the previous night hung in the air like a thick fog. I found my mother in the sunroom, staring out at the gardens. She hadn't slept either. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "He still won't talk to me," she said without turning around. "He just keeps saying it's over." "I don't believe him," I said, sitting down across from her. "Neither do I," she confessed, her voice fragile. "In 35 years, he has never kept a secret like this from me. Whatever it is, it's big. It's old." She finally looked at me, her expression filled with a deep maternal fear. "Be careful," she warned. "Your father, when he is backed into a corner, he can be ruthless, even with family." Her warning solidified my resolve. This wasn't just about my own identity anymore. It was about her. She had given my father her entire life, building this family with him, only to be treated like a stranger in her own home. She deserved the truth. We both did. I decided my first step was to try my father again, but this time with a different approach. I found him in his home office, a grand, wood-paneled room that always smelled of leather and old books. He was on the phone, his voice sharp and clipped. He was all business again, as if nothing had happened. He hung up as I entered. "What is it?" he asked, not looking up from his papers. "I need to talk to you," I said, keeping my voice calm and even. "I've already told you, the matter is closed," he said dismissively. "I'm not asking about last night," I lied. "I'm asking about you, about your life before you met Mom." That got his attention. He finally looked up, his eyes narrowing. "What about it?" "I don't know much," I said, trying to sound casual. "You never talk about it. Were you ever serious with anyone else? Before Mom?" The question was a shot in the dark, but it hit its mark. A flicker of something, anger, panic, crossed his face before he suppressed it. "That is none of your business," he said, his voice dangerously low. "My life before your mother has no bearing on you." "I think it might," I pushed gently. "That man last night? Did you know him from back then?" "Enough," he roared, slamming his hand on the desk. The sound echoed in the silent room. "I gave you an instruction. You will drop this. You will not ask your mother about it. You will not ask me about it. You will go to work, do your job, and you will forget this ever happened. Is that clear?" It was. He was terrified, and he was trying to use his anger to make me back down. In the past, it would have worked, but not this time. His rage was a confirmation. The secret was old. It was from his past, and it involved a woman. I felt a new kind of power shift inside me. It wasn't about being the dutiful son anymore. It was about being an adversary. "Yes," I said quietly. "It's clear." I left his office, but I didn't feel defeated. I felt vindicated. I knew where to start digging. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, going through the motions at the office, but my mind was elsewhere. I was piecing together a puzzle with half the pieces missing. My father's past was a black box. He had always presented his life as a straight line. A modest upbringing, a scholarship to a good university, a tireless climb to the top, and then meeting my mother, the perfect partner to complete the picture. He never spoke of struggles, heartbreaks, or mistakes. His history was as curated as the art on our walls. That evening, I called my best friend, Liam. He and I had grown up together. He knew my family almost as well as I did, but from the same distance of an outsider. I met him at a quiet bar downtown, a place where no one would know us. I told him everything. The stranger's arrival, his shocking claim, my father's ghostly pale face, and his furious denial. Liam listened patiently, swirling the ice in his glass. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. "Wow," he said finally. "That's a lot." "Tell me I'm crazy, Liam," I said. "Tell me it's just some elaborate scam and my dad overreacted." He shook his head. "I could tell you that. And it might be a scam. But a scammer doesn't make a man like your father look like he's seen a ghost. Robert is the most controlled person I've ever met. For him to lose it like that, the guy's claim has to be rooted in something real." Hearing him say it out loud confirmed my own fears. "So what do I do?" I asked. "He's forbidden me from talking about it. He's shut down completely." "You can't go through him," Liam said, leaning forward. "You have to go around him. You need to find out who this guy is. Did he give a name?" "No," I admitted, frustrated. "He just showed up. My dad took him outside and he was gone." I remembered something else. He said, "You know who I am." And he told my dad, "We need to talk. It was personal." "Okay, so your dad knows him," Liam reasoned, "which means there's a connection. A name, a place, something in his past. Old records, address books, yearbooks." The idea sparked something. My father was meticulous. He kept records of everything, but his personal history, the part he kept hidden, would be harder to find. Then I remembered something from my childhood. There was a storage room in the attic, filled with old boxes from before he was married. He always kept it locked. He'd once told me it was just old business files, nothing interesting. At the time, I believed him. Now, I wasn't so sure. "There's a room in the attic," I told Liam. "It's always locked." Liam's eyes lit up. "Bingo," he said. "A man with a secret that big doesn't throw the evidence away. He locks it away. You have to get into that room." The thought was daunting. It meant directly defying my father, breaking into a part of his private world he had explicitly sealed off. It felt like a point of no return. "What if I find something I don't want to find?" I asked, the weight of it all pressing down on me. "You're already there," Liam said bluntly. "Right now, you're living with the ghost of the secret. At least if you know what it is, you can fight it. Or live with it. But you can't live with a question mark this big hanging over your head. It'll eat you alive." He was right. The uncertainty was the worst part. I needed answers, no matter how ugly they were. The next day, I waited until my father left for a series of meetings downtown, and my mother went to a charity luncheon. The house was quiet. My heart was pounding as I went to the hall closet where my father kept a ring of old keys. I found the one labeled attic storage. My hand trembled as I took it. Climbing the stairs to the attic felt like a transgression. The air grew warmer and smelled of dust and old wood. The storage room door was at the far end of the attic, plain and unassuming. The key slid into the lock and turned with a stiff click. I pushed the door open and was met with a wall of musty air. The room was filled with cardboard boxes stacked high. Most were labeled in my father's neat, precise handwriting. Tax records, 1980, 1985, university notes, early ventures. It seemed he was telling the truth. It was mostly old business files. I started to feel a pang of guilt. Maybe I was wrong. I spent an hour pulling down boxes, my initial excitement fading into dusty frustration. It was all just paper. Financial statements, old contracts, lecture notes. I was about to give up when I saw a small metal footlocker tucked away in a dark corner behind a stack of ledgers. It had no label. It was locked, of course. But this lock was a simple padlock. I went back downstairs and found a pair of bolt cutters in the garage. The guilt was gone, replaced by a surge of adrenaline. I was close. Back in the attic, I cut the lock. It snapped with a loud crack that made me jump. I lifted the heavy lid of the footlocker. Inside, it wasn't business papers. It was personal. There was a stack of old photographs, a few books, and a small, leather-bound journal. I picked up the photos first. They were of my father, but a younger version of him, a man I barely recognized. He was in his early 20s, long before he had the weight of an empire on his shoulders. In many of the photos, he was with a young woman. She had dark, wavy hair and a bright, infectious smile. She was beautiful. It was the same woman from the torn photo album I'd seen as a child. I dug deeper and found a small bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. I carefully untied it. The letters were from the woman. Her name was Sarah. I read the first one. It was a love letter, full of hope and plans for their future together. She wrote about the small house they would build, the life they would share. Her love for him was palpable on the page. Then I found my father's journal. My hands shook as I opened it. His handwriting was less controlled back then, more emotional. He wrote about Sarah, about how she was different from the world he was being pushed toward, a world of wealth and strategic alliances. He wrote about his father, my grandfather, who was pressuring him to marry into a family with money and status, the family of my mother. I flipped through the pages, my heart sinking with every entry. He wrote about feeling trapped between the life he wanted with Sarah and the life that was expected of him. And then I found the entry that made my blood run cold. Sarah told me tonight. She's pregnant. My God, what have I done? This changes everything. My father will disown me. Everything I've worked for will be gone. I felt sick. I kept reading, my eyes flying across the page. A few weeks later, another entry. I made my choice. I have to. It's the only way to protect the family legacy. I told Sarah it was over. I offered her money. She threw it in my face. She said she never wanted to see me again. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I broke her heart. I broke my own. But my father is pleased. The engagement to Eleanor can proceed as planned. I dropped the journal. It fell to the dusty floor with a soft thud. There it was. The secret. Not in a vague suspicion, but in my father's own words. He had a child, a son. He abandoned him and his mother to marry my mother, to secure his inheritance, to build the empire that I was now supposed to lead. The man at the door. He wasn't a grifter. He was my brother, my older brother. And the phrase he used, the real heir. It wasn't just about money. It was about legitimacy. He was the firstborn son. By all rights, he should have been the one raised in this house, given this name, this life, my life. I sat there on the floor of the dusty attic, surrounded by the ghosts of a life my father had buried. The shock was overwhelming, a physical weight pressing down on me. I felt a profound sense of dislocation, as if the ground beneath my feet had turned to sand. My entire identity was a lie. I wasn't the sole heir. I was the replacement. The convenient, socially acceptable son who had allowed my father to have it all. A wave of anger, hot and sharp, washed over the shock. Anger at my father for his cowardice, for his monumental selfishness. He didn't just abandon a woman and a child. He built his entire life, our entire family, on top of their erasure. He had lied to my mother for 35 years. He had lied to me for my entire life. He had looked me in the eye and told me to forget the man at the door, to discard the truth as if it were trash. I carefully placed the journal and the letters back in the footlocker. I didn't close it. I left it open. I wanted him to know I had found it. I walked downstairs, my steps heavy. I felt years older than I had that morning. The house, which had always felt like a sanctuary, now felt like a crime scene. Every portrait on the wall, every expensive piece of furniture seemed tainted by the secret it was bought to conceal. My mother was back. I found her in the living room, arranging flowers in a vase. She was trying to create a sense of normalcy, to mend the tear in our family fabric with routine. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. There you are, she said. I was thinking we could have a quiet dinner tonight, just the three of us. Try to talk things through. I looked at her hopeful, unknowing face, and my heart broke for her. She was still trying to save a marriage that had been alive from the very beginning. I couldn't tell her. Not yet. Not until I confronted him. I don't think he'll want to talk, Mom, I said, my voice hoarse. We have to try, she insisted. We can't go on like this. I didn't have the heart to tell her that this was the only way they had ever gone on. Their entire relationship was a carefully constructed facade. My father came home an hour later. He walked in, briefcase in hand, the picture of a man returning from a hard day's work. He saw me standing in the foyer and his eyes narrowed slightly. He was looking for a sign, trying to gauge if I had obeyed him. Good evening, he said, his tone neutral. We need to talk, I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. In your office. Something in my tone must have alerted him. The cautious look in his eyes sharpened into alarm. He glanced toward the living room where my mother was, then back at me. Fine, he clipped. He led the way to his office and shut the door behind us. He went to his desk and stood behind it, creating a physical barrier between us. It was his fortress. What is this about? He asked. I thought I made myself clear this morning. You did, I said. I walked over to the chair opposite his desk, but I didn't sit down. I wanted to be on his level. You told me to drop it. You told me it had nothing to do with me. And it doesn't, he insisted, his jaw tight. I was in the attic today, I said quietly. The color drained from his face. It was the same ghostly white from the night of the party. The mask was gone. The fear was back. He knew. You had no right, he whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and panic. I had every right, I shot back, my own voice rising, fueled by a day of simmering anger. My entire life has been a lie. Did you ever plan on telling me? Or were you just going to let me live in ignorance forever, being the good little heir while my actual brother lived? Where? What kind of life did you condemn him to? He sank into his chair, the fight seeming to drain out of him. He looked old and defeated. You don't understand, he mumbled, staring at his hands on the desk. Then make me understand, I yelled. Explain to me how you could do that. To her, to him, to Mom. She has no idea, does she? She thinks your marriage is real. The mention of my mother made him flinch. Leave her out of this, he said weakly. She's already in it. She's been in it for 35 years. She just doesn't know it. Her entire life with you is a sham. You married her for her family's connections. It's right there, in your own words. He looked up at me then, and I saw something I didn't expect. Not just fear, but a deep, hollow shame. I was young, he said, his voice pleading. My father was a hard man. He had my entire life planned out for me. Marrying your mother was part of that plan. Sarah, she wasn't. She was a complication. She was a person, I said, my voice thick with disgust. A person you loved who was pregnant with your child, and you called her a complication and threw her away. I tried to provide for them, he said, his voice gaining a desperate edge. I offered her money, a lot of money. She refused it. She cut me off completely. I didn't know where she went. For years, I didn't know if she even had the child. But you found out, I guessed. That's why you looked so scared the other night. You knew who he was. He nodded, a barely perceptible movement. I learned about him about 10 years ago. I hired someone to find out what happened to Sarah. I found out she had passed away, and that she had a son. Ethan. Ethan. He had a name. My brother's name was Ethan. And you did nothing? I asked, incredulous. You found out you had a son, living without a father, whose mother had died, and you did nothing? What was I supposed to do? He cried out, his composure finally shattering completely. Walk into our lives and announce I had an illegitimate son? Destroy your mother? Destroy everything I had built? Destroy your future? My future? I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. My future is built on your lies. It's worthless. All of this. I gestured around the opulent office. It's all built on the back of the woman you abandoned and the son you erased. It's not a legacy, Dad. It's a monument to your cowardice. The word hit him like a physical blow. He recoiled, his face ashen. We stood there in the silence, the chasm between us wider than it had ever been. He wasn't the powerful patriarch I had always known. He was just a small, frightened man, haunted by the choices he had made half a lifetime ago. I felt no pity for him, only a cold, hard clarity. My life was no longer about living up to his expectations. It was about dismantling the lies he had so carefully constructed. "What do you want?" he finally asked, his voice a defeated whisper. "Money? Do you want me to give him money?" "He doesn't want your money," I said, thinking of the man at the door. "He wants his birthright. He wants recognition. And you're going to give it to him." I had no plan, no strategy. The words just came out, born from a raw sense of justice. "I can't," he pleaded. "It would ruin us." "You ruined us the moment you chose your inheritance over your son," I said. I turned and walked to the door. "This is just the beginning. You are going to fix this. All of it." I left him there. A king sitting on a throne of lies, his kingdom crumbling around him. I didn't know what my next move was, but I knew one thing for sure. The quiet, dutiful son was gone, and the man who was taking his place would not be so easily dismissed. The house felt suffocating. I needed to get out. I drove aimlessly for an hour, the conversation with my father playing on a loop in my head. His justifications, his fear, his pathetic attempts to paint himself as a victim of circumstance. It all just fueled my anger. I ended up at Liam's apartment. He opened the door and took one look at my face. "You found something," he said. It wasn't a question. I walked in and sank onto his couch. "I found everything," I said, and I told him about the footlocker, the letters, the journal. I told him my brother's name was Ethan. "An older brother," Liam said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Your dad built his whole world on that lie." "And he wants to keep it that way," I said bitterly. He asked what I wanted. If I wanted him to give Ethan money. He still thinks this is a problem that can be bought and paid for. "Because that's how he solves every problem," Liam pointed out. "But you're right. This isn't about money for a guy like that. This is about identity. He called himself the real heir. He's coming for his name." "My father won't give it to him," I said. "He's terrified of the scandal, of what it would do to his reputation, to the company." He paused. "To Mom." "He's using your mother as a shield," Liam said, his voice sharp. "He's not protecting her. He's protecting himself. If he really cared about her, he would have told her the truth 35 years ago." He was right. My father's concern for my mother was just another manipulation, another tool to keep the secret buried. He was trying to make me complicit in the lie by framing it as an act of protection. "So, what's your next move?" Liam asked. "I don't know," I admitted. I told him he had to fix it, but I have no leverage. He can just deny everything, lock the attic and go on pretending. He's good at pretending. "The journal and the letters are your leverage," Liam said. "But that's a bomb. If you use it, you blow up everything. Your dad's career, your mom's life, the company's stock price. Everything." "I know," I said, running my hands through my hair. "It feels like I'm holding a grenade with the pin pulled out. I don't want to destroy everything. Especially not my mom. But I can't let him get away with this." "Maybe you don't have to go public," Liam suggested. "Maybe the threat is enough. But to make a threat, you need to know what you want. What does fixing it look like to you?" I thought about it. What would justice be in this situation? Money wasn't enough. An apology was hollow. It had to be something real, something that fundamentally changed the power dynamic my father had created. First, I said, thinking out loud, he has to tell my mother the truth. The whole truth. No more lies. Okay, that's step one. Liam agreed. Second, he has to acknowledge Ethan. Not necessarily publicly, not yet, but to the family, to himself. He has to accept that he has another son. And what does that mean for Ethan? It means he gets what he was denied, I said, the idea starting to form. A share. Not of the company, maybe. That's too complicated. But of the family wealth. A real inheritance. Something that sets him up for life, that acknowledges his place. So you want your dad to basically give away half his fortune, Liam said, raising his eyebrows. It's not his fortune to give away, I countered. Half of it should have been Ethan's from the start. It's just restoring the balance. And what about you? Liam asked. Where do you fit into this new world order? That was the question I hadn't let myself ask. If Ethan was the real heir, what did that make me? I don't know, I said honestly. I guess I'm just the other son. The words felt strange in my mouth. For my whole life, I was the one and only. Now I was one of two. You need to talk to him, Liam said. Not your dad. You need to talk to Ethan. You're both on the outside of your dad's lies right now. You have a common enemy. You need to know what he wants, what his story is. You can't fight a war for someone without knowing what they're fighting for. It was a terrifying thought. Meeting the man who was supposed to have my life. The living, breathing embodiment of my father's greatest sin. What would I even say to him? Sorry my existence is the reason you grew up without a father? But Liam was right. I couldn't move forward without understanding Ethan's side of the story. My father's version was tainted by guilt and self-preservation. I needed the truth from the source. The problem was, I had no idea how to find him. He had walked away down our driveway and vanished. I can help with that, Liam said, as if reading my mind. I know a guy, a private investigator. He's discreet and he's good. If this Ethan guy exists, he'll find him. The idea of hiring a private investigator felt like another major escalation, another step into a world of secrets and deception I never wanted to be a part of. But I had no choice. My father had built a fortress of lies, and I needed to find the cracks. Okay, I said, making the decision. Let's find him. The next few days were a tense, silent war. I avoided my father, and he avoided me. We were like two circling predators, each waiting for the other to make a move. The air in the house was thick with unspoken accusations. My mother was caught in the middle. Her attempts at forcing a conversation met with my father's stony silence and my own evasive answers. She knew something was deeply wrong. But she couldn't get either of us to confess what it was. Her frustration was turning into despair. Meanwhile, Liam's PI, a gruff, no-nonsense man named Decker, got to work. All I could give him was a physical description, a first name Ethan, and the fact that he had appeared at our estate. It wasn't much to go on. It's a long shot, Decker had said over the phone. But rich guys who have secrets tend to leave a trail. I'll start with your father's past. See if any names pop up. While I waited, I decided to do more digging of my own. I went back to the footlocker in the attic. I needed to understand the woman my father had left behind. I read through all of Sarah's letters again. They painted a picture of a smart, vibrant woman who was deeply in love. She wrote about her dream of being a teacher, her love for classic literature, her simple desire for a life filled with love, not luxury. She was the complete opposite of the world my father chose. In the last few letters, her tone changed. After the one where she presumably told him she was pregnant, her writing became more anxious. She was worried. She hadn't heard from him. She asked if he was okay. The final letter was heartbreaking. It was written after he had broken things off. It was filled with pain and confusion, but also a fierce, protective pride. "You can have your money and your important family," she wrote. "You can have the life your father wants for you, but you will not have my child. He will be mine, and mine alone. He will grow up knowing he is loved, which is more than your father's money can ever buy. Do not try to find us." She had been so strong. She had chosen dignity over a payoff. And my father had let her go. He had used her refusal of the money as an excuse to wash his hands of the situation completely. 2 days later, Decker called. "I've got something," he said. "It's thin, but it's a lead. I was digging into your father's early life, pre-marriage. Found a college classmate who remembered him being serious with a girl named Sarah Jennings. Said they were inseparable. Then one day it was just over. She dropped out of school mid-semester. No one knew why. Sarah Jennings. I had a last name. Keep digging," I told Decker. "Find out what happened to her. Find out if she had a son." "Already on it," he said. "There's more. The Jennings family owned a bit of land out in the valley. A small farm. Nothing much. But about 20 years ago, your father's company bought that land. Part of a big development project." A cold feeling washed over me. "How much did they pay for it?" I asked. "That's the interesting part," Decker said. "Next to nothing. It was pennies on the dollar, even for back then. The sale was handled quietly. It looks like the family was in some kind of financial trouble. My father hadn't just abandoned her. He had potentially profited from her family's misfortune years later. The callousness of it was staggering. This wasn't just a youthful mistake. It was a pattern of behavior. A ruthless pursuit of his own interests, no matter who got hurt. The tension at home finally broke that night. My mother confronted my father at dinner. She had barely touched her food. "Robert, this has gone on long enough," she said, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and hurt. "I have been your wife for 35 years. I am not a child. I am not a business associate you can stonewall. You will tell me who that man was, or I swear to you, I will pack a bag and go to my sister's." My father looked at her, then at me. His face was a thundercloud. He saw me watching, waiting. He felt trapped. "Eleanor, this is not the time or the place," he said, trying to deflect. "It is exactly the time and the place," she retorted. "This is our home, the home that man walked into. My home. I have a right to know who is threatening my family." "He is not a threat," my father said through gritted teeth. "Then what is he?" she pressed. "A ghost from your past? Did you owe him money? Did you have a business dealing that went sour? Tell me." He stared at her, his jaw working silently. He was calculating, weighing the cost of the lie against the cost of the truth. He chose the lie, as always. "He is the son of an old acquaintance," he said, his voice clipped and artificial. "A woman I knew a very long time ago. He has some misguided idea that I owe him something. It's a simple shakedown. I am handling it." It was a masterful half-truth, plausible enough to sound real, but omitting the entire devastating core of the secret. My mother seemed to deflate slightly. It wasn't the whole story, she knew it, but it was something. It was a crack in the wall. "The son of a woman you knew?" she repeated. "Were you involved with her?" "It was before you and I met," he said quickly. "It was meaningless, a youthful mistake." There it was again, that phrase. A youthful mistake. He used it like an incantation, a magic word to absolve himself of all responsibility. I couldn't take it anymore. I pushed my chair back and stood up. "A mistake?" I said, my voice dripping with contempt. "Is that what you call it?" Both my parents looked at me, startled. "Stay out of this," my father warned, his eyes flashing. "I can't," I said, looking directly at my mother. "He's lying to you, Mom. It wasn't meaningless. He was in love with her. She was pregnant with his child when he left her to marry you." The silence that followed was absolute. It was as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. My mother stared at me, her face frozen in disbelief. Then she slowly turned her head to look at my father. The expression on her face was one of dawning horror. "Robert?" she whispered. "Is that true?" My father looked like he had been struck. He stared at me with pure hatred. I had taken his secret and detonated it at the dinner table. "You," he breathed, his voice venomous. "You went behind my back. You lied to me," I shouted. "You lied to her for her entire life." "Robert," my mother said again, her voice stronger now, trembling with rage. "Tell me he is lying." My father couldn't meet her eyes. He stared down at his plate, a guilty man in the dock. His silence was his confession. My mother let out a sound, a choked sob of betrayal. She stood up so abruptly her chair fell backward with a crash. 35 years, she said, her voice breaking. A lie. My whole life with you has been a lie. She turned and fled the room. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, then the slam of the master bedroom door. I was left alone with my father. He slowly raised his head, and the look in his eyes was terrifying. It was not shame or remorse. It was pure, undiluted fury. "You have destroyed this family," he said, his voice a low, chilling whisper. "No," I replied, my own voice shaking but firm. "You did. A long, long time ago. I just turned on the lights." The aftermath of the explosion was a deafening silence. My mother locked herself in their bedroom and refused to come out. My father retreated to his office, the door firmly shut. I was left to wander the cavernous, quiet house, the echo of my mother's sobs ringing in my ears. I had thrown the grenade. The fallout was just beginning. A part of me felt a terrible guilt for the pain I had caused my mother, but a larger part knew it was a necessary cruelty. The lie was a cancer. It had to be cut out, no matter how much it hurt. Living in a comfortable lie was not living at all. She deserved the dignity of the truth. The next morning, my mother emerged. Her eyes were swollen, but her expression was one of cold, hard resolve. She had packed a suitcase. She walked past me in the foyer without a word and went straight to my father's office. She didn't bother to knock. I followed, stopping just outside the open door. "I am going to my sister's house, Robert," she said. Her voice was steady, devoid of the hysteria from the night before. It was eerily calm. "I need time to think, to decide what I am going to do." My father was standing by the window, his back to her. "Eleanor, don't be dramatic," he said, his voice tired. She let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Dramatic? My husband of 35 years has a secret. Illegitimate son he never told me about. A son who would be the heir to this family if you hadn't hidden him away. And you think I am being dramatic?" "It was for the best," he mumbled, still not turning around. "It protected you. It protected our family." "It protected you," she corrected him, her voice like ice. "It protected your ambition and your inheritance. Do not insult my intelligence by pretending this was some noble sacrifice. You were a coward. You took the easy way out, and you built our life on a foundation of deceit. I look at you now, and I don't even know who you are." He finally turned to face her. The arrogance was gone. He just looked like a tired old man. "What do you want me to do?" he asked weakly. "I want you to have been a different man," she said, her voice breaking for a moment before she regained control. "But it's too late for that. I don't know what I want, but I know I cannot stay here. Not right now. Not while I feel like every part of my life has been a performance." She looked past him and saw me standing in the doorway. Her expression softened for a second. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. Then she turned and walked out of the office, out of the house, and out of the life she had known for more than 3 decades. The sound of her car pulling away down the driveway was the sound of my family finally breaking apart. My father sank into his chair. He looked utterly broken. I felt a fleeting pang of something that might have been pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the fire of my anger. This was a disaster of his own making. He had sown the wind, and now he was reaping the whirlwind. "Are you happy now?" he asked, his voice hollow. "You got what you wanted. You've blown it all up." "What I want is justice," I said coldly. "For my mother, and for him. For Ethan." Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Decker. "Got him. Address and photo attached. His name is Ethan Jennings. He works at a garage downtown. He lives in a walk-up apartment in the old industrial district. Looks like he's had a rough go of it." I looked at the photo. It was him, the man from the party. He was standing outside a grimy-looking auto body shop, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. There was a weariness in his face, but also a strength. The same stubborn jaw as my father, the same determined eyes. I looked from the photo on my phone to the broken man sitting behind the mahogany desk. The contrast was staggering. One had all the wealth and power in the world and was miserable. The other had nothing, but seemed to possess a resilience my father had never known. "I'm going to see him," I told my father. He looked up, alarmed. "No," he said. "Don't. You'll only make things worse. Let me handle it. I'll offer him a settlement. A generous one." "You still don't get it," I said, shaking my head in disgust. "This was never about money. Not for him and not for me. This is about the truth." I left him there, alone in his office with the ruins of his life. I had Ethan's address. It was time to meet my brother. The industrial district was on the other side of the city, a world away from the manicured lawns and stately homes of my neighborhood. It was a place of brick warehouses, chain-link fences, and the constant rumble of trucks. Ethan's apartment building was a 4-story walk-up, sandwiched between a tire shop and a shuttered factory. The paint was peeling and the windows were grimy. I stood on the sidewalk across the street for a long time, just looking at it. This was where my brother lived. While I had grown up with every privilege imaginable, he had grown up here, in the shadow of smokestacks. My father's choice, made 30 years ago, had created 2 completely different universes. I was from one. Ethan was from the other. Now I was about to cross that divide. My heart was pounding as I crossed the street and went inside. The hallway smelled of stale cooking and damp. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs to his apartment. The door was number 3B. I raised my hand to knock, then hesitated. What was I going to say? "Hi, I'm the son your father had after he abandoned you. Nice to meet you." I took a deep breath and knocked. I heard movement inside, then the sound of a lock turning. The door opened a few inches, held by a chain. Ethan peered out. His eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed with suspicion. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice hostile. "My name is—" I started, but he cut me off. "I know who you are," he said. "The prince. Did Daddy send you to clean up his mess? How much are you offering? 100 grand? 200? His words were sharp, dripping with a lifetime of resentment. I couldn't blame him. From his perspective, I was just another part of the machine that had crushed his mother and denied his existence. "I'm not here to offer you money," I said, keeping my voice steady. "My father didn't send me. He doesn't know I'm here." He snorted, unconvinced. "Right. So you just decided to drop by for a cup of tea? Get out of here." He started to close the door. "Wait," I said, putting my hand up. "Please, I just want to talk. I want to understand." He paused, studying my face. He seemed to be looking for a sign of deception. "Understand what?" he asked warily. "Everything," I said. "My father, he lied to me my whole life. I only just found out about you, about your mother. I want to hear your side of the story, the real story." My sincerity must have cut through his anger because he hesitated. After a long moment, he sighed and unlatched the chain. "Fine," he said, opening the door wider. "You've got 5 minutes." I stepped inside. The apartment was small and sparse, but clean. There was a small kitchen area, a worn-out couch, and a bookshelf filled with paperbacks. It was a simple, solitary life. "Your father called me," he said, not bothering to offer me a seat. The night after the party, offered me $250,000 to disappear and never contact him again. My stomach clenched. That was my father's solution. A quick, dirty payoff. "What did you say?" I asked. "I told him to shove it," Ethan said with a grim satisfaction. "My mother didn't take his blood money, and neither will I." He walked over to a small wooden chest in the corner and opened it. It was the source of his story, I realized. His inheritance. Not of money, but of truth. He pulled out a worn photograph. It was a picture of a young, smiling woman holding a baby, Sarah and him. "This is my mother," he said, his voice softening for the first time. "She was the best person I ever knew. She worked 2 jobs to raise me. She never had much, but she made sure I never felt poor. She taught me to read. She taught me to be decent. She taught me to have pride." He looked up from the photo, his eyes hard again. "She also told me who my father was. She didn't want me to grow up with hate. She just wanted me to know the truth. Before she died, she made me promise that one day I would go to him, not for money, but to make him look me in the eye and acknowledge me, to make him say my name." His story was so simple, so powerful. It was about dignity. The one thing my father had tried to strip from him and his mother. "She told me he was a good man once," Ethan continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Before his father and his ambition got to him. She said he made a weak choice, not an evil one. I tried to believe that. For a long time I did, but then a few years ago I found out about the land." "The farm," I said quietly. Ethan looked at me, surprised. "You know about that?" "I've been doing some digging," I said. "He bought my grandparents' farm after my mom died," Ethan said, his voice laced with a fresh layer of bitterness. "They were old, they were grieving, they didn't know what it was worth. He swooped in and stole it from them for nothing. That's when I knew. He wasn't just weak, he was cruel. He didn't just abandon us. He came back to rob our graves." The raw pain in his voice was a physical thing. This was the wound that had festered for years. The final, unforgivable insult. "That's why you came to the house," I said. "It wasn't just about being acknowledged. It was about the land deal. It was about everything." He corrected me. "It was about him building his kingdom on my mother's broken heart and her parents' stolen land. You live in a palace paid for by my family's pain. Do you understand that?" He was staring at me now, his eyes boring into me, challenging me. "Yes," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I do. Now." We stood in silence for a moment. He had laid his entire life of hurt at my feet. Now he was waiting to see what I would do with it. "My father is a coward," I said finally. "He's hiding behind his money and his lies. He won't do the right thing unless he is forced to." "And who's going to force him?" Ethan asked with a cynical laugh. "You? His precious heir?" "I'm not his heir," I said, the words feeling true for the first time. "You are. I'm just the guy who's going to help you claim what's yours." Ethan stared at me, a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. "Why?" he asked, his voice suspicious again. "What's in it for you?" "My mother," I said simply. "He lied to her for 35 years. She deserves to see justice done. And me? I just want to be able to look at myself in the mirror again. I can't do that while living a life built on this." I held up my hand. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I know I have no right to that. Just don't shut me out. We have a common goal. We can help each other." He considered my words for a long time. I could see the conflict in his face, a lifetime of distrust warring with a sliver of hope. "What's your plan?" he asked at last, not committing but not dismissing me either. Leverage, I said. I found his journals. I found your mother's letters. He knows I have them. And I found out about the land deal. I'm going to hire a forensic accountant to go over the sale, to prove he bought it for a fraction of its value. A slow, grim smile spread across Ethan's face. It was the first time I had seen him look anything other than angry or tired. A forensic accountant, he repeated, savoring the words. He'd hate that. I know, I said. The plan is to gather undeniable proof, not just of your existence, but of his calculated, predatory business practices. Proof that would destroy his reputation and the company's stock if it ever came out. Then I'm going to give him a choice. He can either make things right, on our terms, or I release everything. And what are our terms? Ethan asked, his eyes sharp. Full financial restitution for the land, I said, laying it out. The value of the land, plus interest for the last 20 years. A trust set up in your name equal to a significant portion of his personal wealth. A formal, private acknowledgement of you as his son. And he has to tell my mother everything, with no more lies. Ethan was silent, processing it. It was more than he had ever dared to ask for. There's one more thing, I added. He steps down. He gives up control of the company. He retires. His reign is over. Ethan's eyes widened. He'll never agree to that, he said. That company is his life. It's the only way, I said firmly. He can't be allowed to keep the prize he won through all this deceit. He has to lose something he truly values. It's the only real justice there is. Ethan looked at me, a new understanding dawning in his eyes. He wasn't just looking at the son of his enemy anymore. He was looking at an ally, a ruthless one. Okay, he said with a decisive nod. I'm in. Leaving Ethan's apartment, I felt a strange sense of lightness. The confusion and anger that had been churning inside me had settled into a sharp, clear purpose. I had a plan. I had an ally. It was no longer just me against my father. It was the two of us. His two sons united against the lies that had defined both of our lives. The first thing I did was call Decker. I need you to find the best forensic accountant in the city, I told him. Someone who can dig into a 20-year-old land deal and find every dirty secret. That'll be expensive, Decker warned. I don't care about the cost, I said. I had my own trust fund, money that was separate from my father's direct control. It was time to use it. Next, I went to see my mother at her sister's house. I found her in the garden, looking tired but peaceful. I met him, I said, sitting down beside her. Ethan. She looked at me, her eyes full of questions. What is he like? He's had a hard life, I said. But he's strong, he's proud. He's a lot like his mother, from what I can tell. I told her about Sarah's letters, about her refusal to take my father's money. I told her about the land deal. As she listened, her sadness seemed to harden into a quiet anger. So it wasn't just the one betrayal, she said, her voice low. It was a second one, years later. He really is a stranger to me. I have a plan, Mom, I said. A way to make him fix this, but it's going to get ugly. Good, she said, surprising me with her ferocity. Let it get ugly. He is hidden in the shadows for too long. It's time to drag everything into the light. Her support was the final piece I needed. I was no longer just acting for myself or for Ethan. I was acting for her too. I was the instrument of her justice. The next 2 weeks were a flurry of clandestine activity. I met with the forensic accountant, a sharp, meticulous woman named Ms. Albright. I gave her all the information Decker had found. She was confident she could prove the land was acquired through unethical, if not illegal, means. I also met with Ethan several more times. We would meet in quiet coffee shops or parks, away from prying eyes. We were an unlikely pair, the polished executive and the greasy mechanic. But we were bonded by our shared history, our shared wound. I learned about his life, the struggles he faced, the quiet dignity with which he lived. He learned about mine, The gilded cage I had grown up in. The pressure to be a perfect son to a man who was far from perfect. A grudging respect grew between us. It wasn't friendship. Not yet. It was an alliance forged in fire. He gave me the original letters from our father to his mother. "The copies are good for a threat," he said. "But the originals, that's the kill shot." His handwriting, his words. Undeniable. Holding those letters, I felt the full weight of the power I now held. This was the key to unlocking my father's fortress. The day Ms. Albright called me with her final report, I knew it was time. "It's worse than we thought," she said. "He didn't just buy the land at a low price. He used a shell corporation, routed through 2 other holding companies, to hide the fact that he was the buyer. And he was aware of a zoning change proposal that was coming up, which would make the land 10 times more valuable. He knew exactly what he was doing. It was predatory and premeditated. I had him. The journal proved the personal betrayal. The accountant's report proved the financial crime. The letters were the emotional core that tied it all together. I called my father. "We need to have a family meeting," I said. "You, me, and Mom. Tonight, at the house." "Your mother isn't here," he said, his voice weary. "She will be," I said. "I've already spoken to her. This is your one and only chance to tell the whole truth and make this right. If you refuse, I'm going to the board of directors and the press with everything I have. And I have everything." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing. He was trapped. "Tonight, then," he said, and hung up. That evening, the 3 of us gathered in the formal living room. It was the same room where my father had hosted countless parties, projecting an image of power and family unity. Tonight, it was a courtroom. My mother sat in an armchair, her face pale but composed. I stood by the fireplace. My father sat on the sofa, looking small and cornered. "Well," he said, breaking the tense silence. "You called this meeting. What is it you want to say?" "No, Dad," I said. "What is it you want to say? This is your last chance. Tell Mom the truth, all of it, from the beginning." He sighed, a long, defeated sound. He looked at my mother, his eyes pleading for an ounce of the affection he had taken for granted for so long. He found none. Her gaze was as hard as stone. He began to speak, his voice low. He told the story, the same sanitized version he had tried to give before. He spoke of a youthful romance with Sarah, an unexpected pregnancy, a difficult choice. He painted himself as a tragic figure, caught between love and duty. "You offered her money," my mother said, her voice flat. It wasn't a question. "Yes," he admitted. "I wanted to ensure she and the child were provided for." "That's a lie," I interjected. "You wanted to buy her silence. You said so in your journal." I pulled a small bound book from my jacket pocket. Not the real journal, but a convincing replica I had made. I let him see it. His eyes widened in panic. "And what about the land, Robert?" my mother asked, her voice rising. "What about Sarah's parents?" "It was a standard business transaction," he said, his voice getting defensive. "They needed to sell. The company made a fair offer." "A fair offer?" I said, pulling a thick bound report from my briefcase. "This is a report from a forensic accountant. It details how you used a series of shell corporations to hide your identity and buy the land for a fraction of its value, right before a zoning change you knew was coming." "It wasn't a fair offer, Dad. It was theft." I tossed the report onto the coffee table between them. It landed with a heavy thud. My father stared at the report, then at me. The last of his defenses crumbled. He had no more lies to hide behind. "What do you want?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "You've come here to destroy me." "No," I said. "I've come here to offer you a choice, a way out, a way to keep your precious name out of the headlines." I looked at my mother. She gave me a slight nod. It was time. Here are the terms, I said, my voice cold and clear. First, you will establish a trust for Ethan Jennings. The trust will be funded with a sum equal to the current assessed value of the land you took from his family, plus 30 years of compound interest. That is non-negotiable. He flinched at the amount but didn't protest. He knew he was beaten. Second, I continued, you will create a second trust, also for Ethan. This trust will be funded with 50% of your personal net worth, not the company's assets, your own, your stocks, your properties, your personal accounts. Half of it is his. It is the inheritance you denied him. My father gasped. 50%? That's everything. No, my mother said, speaking for the first time in several minutes. That's justice. Third, I said, pressing on, you will step down as CEO of the company, effective immediately. You will announce your retirement. I will take over as interim CEO, and the board will make it permanent. Your time is over. You do not get to keep the throne you built on these lies. This was the blow that truly staggered him. He looked at me, his face a mask of disbelief and betrayal. You would take my company from me? He whispered. My own son? You left me no choice, I said, my voice hard. You value that company more than you value your own family, more than you valued Sarah, more than you valued Ethan, more than you valued Mom. So yes, I will take it. It is the only punishment that will ever truly reach you. He stared at me, his breathing shallow. He was a king being deposed in his own throne room. And finally, I said, delivering the last term, you will write a letter to Ethan. In it, you will acknowledge him as your son. You will apologize for abandoning him, for what you did to his mother, and for the land. You will tell him the full truth without justification or excuse. You will sign it, and I will deliver it. I laid out the terms, one by one, like stones on a grave. He had two options. He could accept my terms, and the matter would remain private. His reputation would be intact, albeit in a quiet, forced retirement. He would lose his power and half his fortune, but not his name. Or he could refuse. And I would burn his world to the ground. The journal, the letters, the accountant's report, I would give them to every major news outlet and to every member of the board. He would be publicly disgraced, his legacy forever defined by this scandal. He knew I would do it. He could see it in my eyes. The son he had raised to be his successor had learned his lessons too well. I had learned to be ruthless. You can't do this, he pleaded, looking at my mother. Eleanor, talk to him. He's our son. My mother stood up. She looked down at him, not with pity, but with a cold finality. He is the man you should have been, Robert, she said. He is facing the truth you spent a lifetime running from. I stand with him. She turned to me. All of it. I agree with all of it. Her validation was the final nail in his coffin. He was alone. His wife was against him. His son was against him. The ghosts of his past had finally cornered him. He sat there for a long time, the silence stretching on. The fight was gone. The anger was gone. All that was left was the hollow shell of a man who had lost everything. Fine, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I agree. I'll call the lawyers in the morning. It was over. I had won. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a necessary, brutal amputation. I had cut the poison out of our family, but the wound would leave a scar forever. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings. My father was a ghost, moving through the process with a numb, vacant expression. He signed the papers, transferred the funds, and drafted his resignation. The lawyers, especially our longtime family attorney, Mr. Thompson, looked at him with a quiet disappointment that was almost worse than my open hostility. Mr. Thompson had known my father for 40 years. He helped me structure the trusts for Ethan, his professionalism a thin veil over his personal judgment of the man he once respected. My father wrote the letter to Ethan. I watched him do it. His hand trembled as he wrote out the words of confession and apology. It was the hardest thing he had ever had to do, and it was decades too late. When it was all done, I took the letter and a portfolio containing the trust documents and went to see Ethan. I found him at the garage, finishing up his shift. We went to a nearby diner. I pushed the portfolio across the table to him. "It's done," I said. He opened it cautiously. He looked through the legal documents, his eyes widening as he saw the numbers. He saw the trust funded by the sale of the land, and the second, much larger trust, funded by half of our father's personal fortune. He was silent for a long time. "This is more than I ever imagined," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's what you were owed," I said. Then I handed him the letter. "This is from him." He took it, his hands greasy from his work. He read it slowly, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he folded it carefully and put it in his jacket pocket. He looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not suspicion, just a deep, profound sadness. 30 years, he said quietly. All it would have taken was this letter, 30 years ago. "I know," I said. "Why did you do all this?" He asked, the question he had asked before, but this time it was different. He wasn't questioning my motives. He was trying to understand me. "Because it was the right thing to do," I said again. "And because he lied to me, too. He built my life on a lie, just like he built his on one. We were both his victims, in different ways." He nodded slowly. "So what happens now?" "He's retired," I said. "I'm running the company. My mother has filed for divorce. She's starting over." "And you and me?" he asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "We're not friends. We're not brothers. Not in any real sense. We're just two strangers who share a father. But maybe that's a start." He gave me a small, tired smile. "Maybe it is." He stood up. "I have to go. I need to think about all this." He paused. "Thank you," he said, the words sounding foreign on his tongue. Then he turned and walked out of the diner. I went to see my mother a few days later. She was in the process of buying a new apartment in the city, a place that was all her own. She looked lighter, freer than I had seen her in years. "You did a brave thing," she told me, taking my hands in hers. "You did what your father never had the courage to do. You faced the truth, no matter the cost." "It cost us our family," I said quietly. "No," she corrected me. "It revealed that our family was never what we thought it was. Now, we have a chance to build something real. You and me. Maybe even you and Ethan someday. Something based on honesty." Our relationship, once a polite, distant thing, was now the strongest it had ever been. We had been through the fire together and come out the other side. My father moved out of the estate and into a smaller, secluded house by the coast. He was a recluse. He had his money, enough to live in luxury for the rest of his life, but he had lost his power, his legacy, and his family. He was a king in exile. I spoke to him once on the phone, a brief, sterile conversation about some final company paperwork. He sounded like a stranger. I had a final drink with Liam to mark the end of it all. He had been my rock through the whole ordeal. "So you're the king now," he said, raising his glass. "You sit on the throne." "It doesn't feel like a victory," I confessed. "It feels like a cleanup, like I just spent a month cleaning up a toxic waste spill." "Sometimes that's what leadership is," he said, "cleaning up the messes of the men who came before you." He was right. I sat in my father's old office, now mine. The grand desk, the leather chair, the view of the city skyline. It was everything I had been raised to want, the pinnacle of the life that had been laid out for me since birth. But I hadn't inherited it. I had taken it. I had seized it in a coup, born of my father's sins. Every day I walk into this office and I'm reminded of the cost of this power. The ruins of my father's life, the broken trust of my mother, the stolen childhood of a brother I am only just beginning to know. My father taught me that a legacy is something you build. He never mentioned you might have to build it on the wreckage of his own. He lost everything because he couldn't face one man. I won because I was willing to. And that is a lesson I will never forget.